Welcome to the Franciska Show podcast on JewishCoffeehouse.com, a show in where I give a voice to Jewish issues, topics, and people. I'm Franciska Frady, your host. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, leave me a comment. You can join our WhatsApp discussion group, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Nicole Meyer. It's great to have you on.
Thank you.
This is our first No More Silence episode in a while. You are public, which is one of the more unusual cases, and you're here to talk about a very public case that most people who are listening probably already heard or knows some information about the case. But we're here to get some of the unspoken parts of the conversations and stories that should be revealed. So let's start off. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how your story begins.
So my name is Nicole Meyer. I am 38 and a mum of 4. And I went to one school my whole life from prep to year 12. Malka Leifer entered that school when I was in year 10 and became a huge part of my life as a teacher, then a principal. And when I finished year 12, I went on to teach in the school that I grew up in, taught there for 13 and a half years. And quite a few of those years were Malka Leifer was my boss. So she was a huge part of my teenagehood and then my early career and then even through my marriage and first child until allegations came up and she fled the country.
So take us through the timeline. What happened? And when you say allegations came up, who was the first one who started talking? So let's start with the timeline a little bit.
So I was 15 and a half when she arrived in Australia. And as a very charismatic principal, she took over a role of year 11 and 12. I was currently in year 10, but she took over a role of year 11 and 12 as like the metronefis of those two year levels to kind of separate them from the high school in Australia, high school year 7 to year 10, and then, so to speak, seminaries, year 11 and year 12, and they focus a lot on teaching methodologies and all that kind of stuff to prepare women to be teachers and potentially other careers. In my time, it was just for teaching. So Malka Leifer was a huge part of that. So she was involved in all the lesson plannings, teaching me how to be a teacher as well as other teachers who did the same. And really within a year of her coming to Australia, she became principal of the whole school, not just year 11 and 12. And in doing so, she had power over absolutely everyone and everything. So there were no decisions that were not made without her say-so. And there was no one above her that you could go to ask or say anything because she was the top. So she had her finger on every pie in the primary school principals, high school. It was just Malka Leifer was anywhere and everywhere. So being that I came from an abusive childhood, she picked up on that pretty quickly and she began to shower me with attention and allow me to give her help and do errands and stuff like that within the school, pull me out of classes to talk to me, find out how I was doing. Now looking back, obviously that was all grooming for something a lot more sinister. When I was in year 11 and year 12, that increased and she began using touch as part of her language. Already in year 10, she started touching students in a very general sense.
Could we back up a little bit? So you said the abuse started when you were 15, not by Malka.
I came from an abusive childhood, as in my mother was extremely abusive, but Malka Leifer continued that, yes.
So can you share a little bit more about the abuse? Was it sexual or was it emotional? Physical?
My childhood abuse was emotional, physical, and anything else I would rather not go into.
When you speak about Malka being very charismatic and just being in the most powerful position, was she a likable person? Because in the photos after the fact, she does not look too charismatic or appealing to, want to be around.
To be perfectly honest, she was probably not the most hygienic, well-dressed person. But her personality and charisma was what pulled everyone towards her. If you were in her orbit, everyone knew you. If she showered you with attention or allowed you to drive her to places, even women within the community, that was considered special. So yes, I know a lot of people have said, who is she? So many people in my socials have said she looks like a man. And it's so interesting to even for me to see that from an outside perspective because she was that big, powerful, charismatic, friendly, outgoing person. And the principle that she replaced was academic and professional and dignified and loose. So the comparison between the two was absolutely enormous. So she came in with this gust of energy into a school, bringing it to life with a very ultra-Orthodox approach with a lot of different programs and ideas coming from Israel as well. So it was a huge shift in a positive way initially for the school. So she definitely was likable.
Mm-hmm. And she spoke English, or she learned on the job?
When she came, her English was definitely more fractured, but we understood her. I mean, she taught us in year 10 straight away. So, but she had a very heavy Israeli accent, which dropped as the years went on.
Okay, so back to the story and your timeline.
Yes, so I was year 11 and 12 when Malka Leifer began to increase in what her abuse and her grooming and her inappropriate behaviours. I had no idea at the time what it was. There were school camps, there were school excursions, there were weekends away and all that. I was not her only victim at the time. It was pretty clear who were her favourites. No one spoke about it. It just happened as part of the school. People definitely witnessed some stuff, but Malka Leifer made everything okay.
Okay, give us an example.
So when we were in year 10, she would shepherd us down the corridor, put her arms on people's backs and shoulders. Now, I was 15 and I'd never been touched by a teacher in high school in my life. It's just touch was just not part of the way that the school ran from a teacher to a student, let alone, even my friends and I didn't hug each other. We didn't grow up in that kind of, way of doing things. And she made it okay by doing that. So if she was shepherding us down the corridor and her hands was on his back or shoulder, it's like no one questioned that. So then if she sits next to someone and puts her hand on their thigh, again, it wasn't questioned. And sometimes she did things in plain sight where she would have her hand on someone's back an entire bus journey. And people would be all around. The bus is full of people. But it was just, she allowed things to be okay in public that were really not okay and were insidious. So therefore, when things got worse and she did do it in a hidden way, it was like, oh, Malka Leifer's talking to that student. No one's going to question why the blinds are down and the door is locked and that girl comes out with a very red face an hour and a half later, myself included. So no one questioned her. She made a lot of things okay. She was in charge. She was the boss. And no one questioned anything that she did or said. And she ran the school in a very flying manner. She would literally prep me for a high school class. She needed me to substitute 5 minutes before I would walk in and deliver a passion lesson for 15 minutes to a high school class. So she ran the school in a flying manner, but somehow managed to keep it all together. But that is for sure due to all the teachers that she had under her that worked very hard as well. She was very sparse with her compliments, and I think that was part of her manipulation and abuse. She one time, I'll never forget, she one time said to me when I was taking her home, it's a compliment for a teacher if a student is better than her. And I was like, is that like a backwards compliment? Are you telling me that you are happy that I'm teaching, I'm doing well? It was like she was very sparse with her compliments, but somehow there was a desperate need to do well and be approved of and show her that I was doing my best and giving up my best to the school, which I was. So when I finished year 12, I went straight into teaching, which then directly gave her more access to me because I was not locked into a classroom, in particular for more lessons. Since she was able to pull me aside, or by then I had my driving lessons and I had my license, and I was able to take her to feed her baby or to pick her up or to take her to places. When her husband was overseas, she asked me to come to her house and drive her precious husband's car. God forbid I touch anything in there that was his, but drive them to school. I would go to her house and clean up before we had school meetings because we had professionals come in to help us to teach us methodology and stuff like that. So she was involved in every aspect of my life. And she broke my first engagement, who I was engaged to, because she decided she did not want me to be married to that boy. So she worked very hard with my mum. And at that time, the two of them forced me to break off that engagement. And I had to call the boy 5 weeks before the wedding and tell him why I could not get married to him and break off the shit off over the phone. And that was that. And then go back to work the next day as if nothing happened. And then she could just continue abusing me. When I did get engaged the second time, she was at my wedding. She was at my wedding reception. That was now my 3rd year after teaching. And she actually, in front of all my family, right after the chuppah, on my way to the yichud room with my husband, she came and grabbed me in this really big hug. It's such a holy, wrong moment in front of everyone, in front of all my husband's advocacy friends who were dancing, taking us to the yichud room, and grabbed me and put me in a big hug and covered my face and neck in hugs and kisses. And my older two siblings at the time looked at each other and were like, if they did tell me they had seen it, I could almost tell myself that didn't happen. And they were like, that was so strange. It was like the wrong moment, the wrong time. They just thought she was really close to me. So almost like a mother in a sense. So maybe it was okay that she did that. But that was another example, was her abuse in plain sight. Her ability to control the situation and come and approach me at a time that I did not belong to her. I never belonged to her, even though she thought that I did. Take from me right before I'm going into a yichud room. So that is the projection of her still in my life. And then through my first pregnancy, through my first child, and then my younger sister disclosed to a therapist in Israel that she had been abused by Malka Leifer. The therapist called me and I acknowledged that abuse. And then within 3 days, Malka Leifer left the country.
She left Australia to...
She fled back to Israel, where she came from 8.5 or 9 years before that. And that was in 2008 when she fled.
And she was supposedly safe in Israel, even though that's where the allegations came out?
The allegations came out in Israel. My sister was living there at the time, but the allegations that she was speaking about happened in Australia. So yes, she was safe in Israel. Like, she was not flagged. She went back into the country and she went to live where she lived with her family, potentially first at Bnei Brak and then eventually to Emmanuel.
How many others were there? And I'm curious about the dynamic amongst you. Was there an understanding this is happening to all of us, but we're not talking about it? Was there a sense of I'm special and I'm the only one? Talk to me a little bit about that.
I would say I probably know about 15 to 20. She was in the school for, I think, 8 years. And she mainly targeted students probably from 15 and up. So the upper high school year levels. No one spoke to no one. No one understood anything about anyone, but everyone knew who Malka Leifer's favorites were at the time, at any given time, because she would make that obvious by pulling them aside, giving them one-on-one time, talking to them, giving them Sunday lessons. I had Sunday lessons, which were times of abuse, of course. So everyone knew who were her favorites. Therefore, in hindsight, you could say, well, if that person was in her room with the door closed and that's what happened to me, you can almost guarantee that's what happened to that person. But during that time, no, absolutely not. It was just, if you were lucky enough to be Malka Leifer's helper or get special attention, you were lucky enough. And if you weren't, you weren't. There was no understanding at the time that she was doing anything to anyone at all. No one talked about anything. It was just, you were lucky enough to be chosen to be one of hers.
So you and your sisters also never talked about it with each other?
So my two younger sisters were abused as well. Myself and my next younger sister, we told our third younger sister that Malka Leifer is not such a good person. I don't remember the exact language that we used, but that's all we said. We're all very close in age, but we just said something like, she's not so great, as in don't become so close to her kind of thing. But that's it. And we still don't know.
You got together and you decided to tell her, or you started talking and then the middle sister?
No, that's all we said.
That's all you said. Are you comfortable going into the Sunday lessons, the sessions where the abuse happened, and talk more about what happened there?
Well, obviously I won't become too graphic, but Sunday the school was empty. So there was no one in the school besides the boys that faded down the road, and potentially there were some board meetings across the school and the cleaners. So it had a very empty feel about the school, which meant that she had access and she could do what she wanted. And she was that daring on Sundays, and she would allow the blinds to stay open. And I remember that very distinctly, because every other time the blinds were closed down to the bottom and she had locked the door. But she didn't lock the door or close the blinds at that time. And the Sunday lessons were to have extra learning, which I was a very curious student and always wanted to know more. So it was about, we learned Yeshayahu, and I remember Treyasa, and I remember her saying the words of the women's shoes, going, making noises on the pavement, and how the Navi said that wasn't appropriate. It's the weirdest memory to just have that. But then she would come from the other side of the table and sit right next to me. Then she would move her chair closer, put her hand on my thigh, and then up my back, and then move my hair behind my ear. She had a way of doing things until it got more and more and more, and then she just continued further and further and further, and the Navi was far from anything. That was potentially the first 5 minutes of the time that we had together. And then after the hour and a half, probably the next student would come, because she had a couple of students on Sunday. I to this day, I have no idea how I got home, how I even got there. It's just one of those things that your mind blocks out when it's just too hard to think about.
You don't have to get graphic, but was the whole session talking about it, and then there was this break in between the session? Or was everything around the abuse, and there was maybe some Navi or Tanakh going on in the background? In terms of you going in and out of consciousness or being aware of what's happening, how much of the session, and everything was obviously abuse, the whole thing was designed to be abusive and manipulative. But in terms of how much time did she need to invest to get her hands on you? Or would she go right away? I guess there's many questions in here.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think the best way to put it. I think it got to a point after the grooming, which took place when I was in year 10, with the, so to speak, innocent touching, which was not innocent at all. Once the grooming stage was over, then in and every time she had access to me, it would be sexual. So it would be something, I'll be fixing a newsletter in the office and she would come right next to me and slide her hand onto my thigh. And there was someone right behind me doing a different computer, but their back was to me. So she became, in a way, very daring. There was a taxi ride where I picked her up from camp where she would put her hand up my back on my skin. Someone's in the front seat. So yes, I spent a lot of time with her. I cut up fruit. I made school plays. She would call me to cut up fruit for events and stuff like that. So I did a lot of stuff that wasn't abusive for her and work-wise because I was very involved in the school. But any time that she approached me alone, it became an abusive situation. Didn't matter where it was. So school camp, she chose me to sleep in the same room as her. That was intentional. Anytime she was alone with me in camp, that was abusive. For the rest of the camp, I was obviously around running the programs with the students, with talking to the other teachers. But I was always aware that she was there watching me. So I can't explain that she, let's say with the Sunday lessons for the nubby, we probably did 5 minutes of nubby and then her hands were on me already. And that was it for the rest of that session.
So not so much learning, that was done.
No.
I would like to transition at some point to the healing and all the things you've learned post coming out. But before we get there, at any point did you feel like you had to take more to protect your sisters? Was there an understanding that if you just keep your mouth shut and you go along, then you're protecting others?
I don't think I knew what was happening to me. I was so dissociated from present reality that a lot of people say to me, how could you not know you're being abused once you were married? So much so that the prosecution took that 1.5 years of abuse out of my statement and said we cannot speak about that in trial because the jury will not understand, even though there's academic articles written about how abuse can continue into someone's marriage from such situations. I just didn't know. The only thing that helped me to stop her abusing me, let alone forget about protecting others, because that didn't even exist. It was me and her and my life and her and everyone else's life. I don't think anyone had the awareness to be able to protect others or my sisters or anything. But there is one example, and I'll give that in a minute. The only thing that stopped her from abusing me fully was my unborn child. And that my innocence at the time, and I was 20, my innocence was that her big fat body is going to squash my baby because she lay on top of me and I was pregnant with my first child and she knew that. And I was 4 months pregnant or 3 to 4 months pregnant. And that's what I thought. And my protection from my child made sure that I was never alone with her in the room again. So that's what clicked, that this is not okay. Didn't mean she didn't abuse me further until she left, but it just meant I wasn't alone with her in the room again, but that act could happen to me again. At least not when I was pregnant. The only time I felt like I could protect my sister was in a camp when my sister slept over in my room, the room that because I was a teacher, she was a visiting student. So she was lucky she had a teacher in the camp, so she could sleep in the room, didn't have to go and bunk out on the floor of another room. And so she got a bed, and Malka Leifer abused me that night when she thought my sister was sleeping in the same room. And the next morning, Malka Leifer kicked me out of the room so she could abuse my sister in the bathroom. And I didn't want her to. I ran around the camp looking for something for my sister to have an excuse to interrupt. That knocked on the door and tried to get into the bathroom to save my sister. And Malka Leifer just took what I had gotten, shooed me away. And I don't know what happened in that bathroom to this day. It's not something we've discussed. But there's this, at that camp, there was this understanding between the both of us that she was abusing both of us. Just like, yeah, my sister has a memory of words like that. I said something like, I hate being touched, but I don't remember saying anything. I just remember looking at her looking at me, and she went back to school and I went back on the bus with the students that I was teaching.
Talk to me about the broken engagement, what was going through your mind and what was being said to you, and how did you feel when your agency was completely taken away from you?
So I think coming from an abusive household, and I think anyone who listens and has been through abuse will know that abusers take a lot of control over the victims. And often it's not just the sexual abuse, it's everything around that. So coming from an abusive home where I was so tightly controlled, Malka Leifer stepped up and did the exact same thing. So everything, I didn't have any of my own autonomy, decision-making, awarenesses to be like, no, I want something different. So for whatever reason, Malka Leifer felt threatened by the person I was getting engaged to because it was the son of the person she kicked off to become principal. So it was probably relating to that because I had each of them in one ear telling me how bad the other one was at one point. I guess my mother didn't want me to get married or didn't like the boy. I don't even remember what, but between the two of them, they managed to. I was literally given a list of the things he had done wrong, told to call him and told to break it off. I didn't get a choice. I didn't get any options to say what I want, don't want. I didn't get a choice to recover those couple of days, take time to work out that 5 weeks my wedding was supposed to happen, and it's not now. It was straight back to a community event that night, on stage in front of 200 people presenting something on behalf of the school, and then back to work the next day. So that's the dissociated way of living and the controlled way of living I was between the abuse that I was experiencing.
Did anyone ask you, like, what happened? The assumption for me is when there's a broken engagement, people are prying.
Yeah. I distinctly remember walking through the park when I was just completely alone and someone said to me, what happened? And I was just like, didn't have an answer for them. What was I supposed to say? The person who I was engaged to, everyone knew that person's mother because she used to be the principal of the school and she was very well known and well respected in the community. I had a couple of friends rally around me that evening so that I was not alone when I was going to have to get up in front of 200 people for Shino's evening and talk something that had already been prearranged before this engagement was supposed to break that particular Sunday. Obviously now in hindsight, I would be like, I would have never gone out again that night if I had, if I had a choice. No, I think we were advised by some rabbi or something to keep our mouths quiet and not say anything. So I didn't say anything. Whether the boy's family said anything about my mum or the situation, I don't know. I think they're well aware by now that, Malka Leifer had a big role to play in that. And that was it. It was, community gossip until the next thing came along. Like, it's what happens normally.
Let's go to when the whistle was blown and what happened from there. How soon did you start therapy? When did you bring it up with your spouse? What came out of that? How did everything come to surface?
I'll try to keep it that as concise as possible because that's...
You don't have to. You don't have to.
That's hours of talking. Okay. My sister disclosed in 2008 to a social worker / therapist who used to live in Melbourne. So when my sister disclosed, she thought instantly it was a man. And she's like, who in the school's a man? Because there's no men allowed in the school. My sister's like, no, it's Malka Leifer. And she couldn't believe it because she knew Malka Leifer. And she's like, are you sure? My sister's like, call my sister. She'll confirm. So I get this phone call. I don't remember if my younger sister called me and said to me, I just disclosed and opened up something that... I don't remember that part. I just remember her calling me and I said, yes, I was also. And then I would say within 3 days, but I don't know what happened properly. And that's what the police will be investigating in. A meeting went on where Malka Leifer was paid to leave the country. And I was prepared by some people because I was still working in the school that Malka Leifer might come and approach me. And I'll never forget because it's the first time in my life I've ever seen her scared. And that's a searing memory in my mind because she's such a powerful woman. She pulled me out of class and she said to me, what's going on? What's happening? And she looked really scared. And it's the last time I saw her. And then she was gone, 2008. And again, the school felt like death had come upon the school. Everyone was so serious. Wasn't much chatter. Definitely no support. Everyone the teachers were, all gathered into the bigger, into the auditorium, the lunchroom at the time and told something. And someone stepped in as an interim principal. Silence. Dead silence. Nothing. Zero. So of course, what do? My second child, my third child, I just continue on life, continue on teaching in the school I was abused in, continue having very young children. I may have said something to my husband, but what was I to say? I was not even aware of it myself yet. I was completely disconnected from it. Then 2011, my youngest sister of the three of us, her boyfriend at the time encouraged her to go and give a police statement. And that threw me, and I was like, but I didn't do anything about it. My second sister gave a statement, and then it took me 8 months, and I was like, okay, I think I'm strong enough to give a statement. And I walked into the police station in October 2011. That was the day I found out I was pregnant with my youngest. That's the 2 acts that will be synonymous, doing that test in the morning, knowing I was pregnant with my 4th child, and going to the police station completely alone, no one with me. So traumatizing for me that I don't remember 0 of that entire experience at all, other than being out in the sunshine after, and for the first time in my life, taking a week off work to recover from that, which I didn't even know what that really was. I didn't even know what I'd even said because I was so dissociated from it. And again, back to work. A week later. But it was already, that's when the trauma started surfacing. It was my hardest pregnancy. Every day I thought my baby was going to be dead, kept thinking he's not moving, kept worrying I'm not going to have a baby that's alive at the end of it, even to the day of labor. So that definitely, I had heaps of anxiety that now looking back, I can understand exactly why I had that entire pregnancy. I was blessed with a beautiful, gorgeous, very happy baby boy. So Hashem blessed me with a very, cheerful, gorgeous child to help me with that for sure. But no, therapy was nowhere in my conscious awareness. Absolutely not. Just nothing. I was in touch with the detectives constantly about what they're doing with our statements, sending them to Canberra, which is capital, and sending papers to Israel to extradite her. It just, when they finally announced in 2014 that they have arrested her, I was in a conference for Israeli teachers and stuff like that. And I found out from the news before the police even found out. And I called the police and I said, Malka Leifer's been arrested. And they're like, we'll get back to you. And my sisters are traveling somewhere in Greek islands, I don't know where, and I'm calling them on their holiday. And I'm like, Malka Leifer's been arrested. It's like this massive news that came out of nowhere. And that shook my life, upside down. And then started the years of her trying to lay justice until my sisters and I started campaigning. 2017.
So when did she get arrested?
She got arrested the first time in 2014.
By whom?
By the Israeli police on the extradition order. Finally, from 2011 to 2014, they finally served that extradition order on her. The prosecution at that time, we weren't particularly close to them. We didn't have as much direct communication with them. Otherwise, we would have fought that bail that she first received, tooth and nail. But she received that. They admit that is the only mistake they made in the whole process, that they did not appeal that bail, that first bail that she got. And she received bail because why not? There was not enough push from any other side to say, no, she's a flight risk. No, there was nothing. So then once she received bail, she probably thought she was scot-free in a way. And she never turned up at court. She pretended to be sick for years. She manipulated the justice system. We all know the health minister got involved and did what he did with the health ministers who with the psychiatrist that checked her and the reports they made because of his pressure. And she just didn't turn up. When she got arrested again in 2019, I think it was. That was a massive moment. And that's when we were already so much more on the case and we were campaigning and stuff. And we were like, that's it. She's never, ever, ever going to get out again. And when there was a bail suggestion again, we fought and we pulled and we spoke to everyone and anyone, and she was absolutely not bailed again because we knew if she got bailed a second time, we will never see her again. Never.
She had support from rabbis. I remember reading something about that.
Yes.
Who was supporting her? And she had financial support also.
Financial support, not a single reporter, not a single investigator has been able to trace the financial trail. No one. It has been the most well-kept secret that no one knows. Yes, we saw there was fundraising at some point. We heard there's a connection in England with the Horidonka River, who's a blood uncle of hers. I don't exactly know how. So we heard some connections. Still, no one has been able to get into that and understand who financed her, but it was in the ballpark of millions, whoever financed her.
And who was backing her reputation-wise?
So reputation-wise, I don't know all the rabbis that stood up for her in Israel because I wouldn't know what they did. I know I saw a letter going out about her, please help this woman, a principal and mother, like a Hebrew, kind of plea to people to support. But Rav Grossman, from, I think he's in Israel, or I'm not sure exactly what he's in charge of. He marched into court one time. I said he will bail her the second time. And it was the most betraying thing to see a religious rabbi walking into court, into a religious courtroom with a religious judge, and use his religious status to just walk in and say, I will bail her. I'll make sure that she's safe in my family with my wife and potential children. And donors pulled out. That's how the strings were pulled. He had big donors from America that supported his yeshiva, and they pulled out from supporting him if he would bail her. So after he had that financial flack, he withdrew his bail application, and he didn't bail her. The judge was willing to let him bail her, which again was shocking for us because that's Israeli court systems and Australian court systems and American court systems work so differently. I've been to all three, and they're all so different, but the Israeli court system is like none other. So for that to be able to happen, who marches into a courtroom and just demands something of a judge like that? There's steps you have to go through if you are able to bail someone, and if you need to pay something and requests, and then we should get it. Like it was. But we're here in Australia, we're watching these court cases live by people that support us and tell us what's happening, and it's like huge stress when that particularly happened, because the thought of her getting bailed by someone so great and able to bail her was terrifying, but thankfully that didn't succeed. And Rabbi Shafran as well, who we met personally with, and he also supported her because his daughters were taught by her and nothing happened to them. So potentially, possibly, we're lying. I had her teacher call me from Israel during the years of the campaign, telling me that Malka would never do such a thing. And we, as the victims, caught her in a bad moment when she was postpartum because she had 3 children here. And that we had magazines from the street. Therefore, we know this kind of stuff. And I said to her, my husband's in college, I've got children who are in religious schools. I don't have magazines from the street. And we didn't grow up like that either. Just giving her answers to her excuses, which are utter rubbish for an excuse for hate or abuse anyway. But I tried to speak to her to show her that everything she was saying around what she was saying was utter rubbish and was not true. I don't know if I convinced her, but I was very, very strong with her on that phone call. But it's just so that she had a lot of people around her who didn't believe that she did it. And on one of our trips to Israel, victims came forward to one of the reporters from the schools that she taught in Israel, which is why my belief why she came on the other side of the world to get away from the trouble she caused there. But they're not going to go forward because they said it's past statute of limitations to report, and they just don't want to unsettle their lives to do that. But I think at least 3, maybe more. So she definitely abused before she came here. Just alleged, because we don't have people that have come forward.
Talk to me about the campaigning you talk about. What did that entail?
So my sister released her story. So she began as the public face of the campaign. That's me, my sister, first. And then later on that year, in October 2017, I decided I will publicly step forward and support, not just privately behind the scenes. And I stepped out with her and my younger sister, Ellie, as well. We did our first advocacy campaigning trip in 2017, second 2018, third in 2019. I went the fourth alone 2020 early, just before the skies closed because of COVID. And each trip we met with the rape crisis organizations, we met with advocates, we met with mental health advocates, we met with Shana from, again, formerly JCW, we met with Shana Keys-Jaskell, we met with Ayelet, we met with the prosecution team, the head of the prosecution team. We just met with anyone and everyone, and politicians. We were in the Knesset a couple of days, meeting with any politician that would come and listen, and Merav Michaeli and Ayelet Shaked, and all these politicians who would listen to our story, raise awareness, and say that Israel and Australia together must make her come back somehow. And we had the prosecution team in Israel and the prosecution team in Australia just last year tell us if we hadn't done what we had done, she would not be back in Australia. They gave us full credit for what we campaigned and how hard we worked tirelessly to raise awareness of what was happening and how she was manipulating. And a huge part of that, of course, was Shana's investigation, what her organization did to uncover Malka Leifer's lies and fraud, that she was so mentally unwell, where she was not, was incredible. That really just moved it along tremendously to give proof to the police and to the court that she was lying about being so unwell that she could not attend court hearing after court hearing after court hearing.
They followed her around and had pictures and videos of her going about her life.
Once they had enough footage, they handed her over to a special police force. And they obviously looked at it, realized, yes, this is a crime. And that's when her second arrest happened. And apparently they knocked the door down and she was cooking and screaming. I don't know. I haven't seen footage of that. I've just heard that it wasn't an easy arrest. I think at that point she might have thought that she was invincible. I've been to Emmanuel. I've seen how remote and desolate it is. I've seen how Emmanuel, like, all just bunker down and protect each other. Within minutes of being there, a white van came careening around the corner. The security asking us why we're in the grocery shop and what we're doing there. So I've seen where she was. I've seen the nameplate outside her house and the neighbours that all pretended they just moved in there just that day. They've got nothing to say about her. So she was protected.
Does she have Hasidic background?
She does. I don't know hers exactly. I think that she always said they were from Nadvarna Host. I think her father-in-law it's an abuser. I'm not sure if he was convicted or what happened with that case exactly. I believe her son, Malka Leifer's own son, was charged with some abuse in the last 6 to 8 months with something that happened. So whatever family she comes from is definitely not a healthy one. I'm not sure exactly of her Hasidic background, just know from her husband's side he's from Nadvarna or Host, which is what she was always told us when she was here.
Is there anything you can say about what you saw about her relationship with her husband that maybe seemed odd?
I think a lot of people did not like her husband when he was here. He was known as a really, really big bully. Myself, he thought his kids were his absolute prized possessions. Anyone that did anything against his kids, woe to them. But at the same time, he treated his kids awfully. People saw he made his kids line up and stand and follow him. Or one time, my husband and I went there for a Shabbat meal because young married. She invited us over and he whacked one of the kids across the face for not doing something 100% well. And my husband was like, we're not going there again, which we did not. And so I've got friends who've said that she had a black eye at some point because he potentially hit her as well, but I can't confirm that because I don't know 100%. I know she was scared of him. The amount of times I was in the house and things were happening and she was in a state of undress, or I was, because she had been abusing me, and he would come home early and expect it. She would rush, like she want him to see anything or be aware of anything. And she had girls to sleep over when he was overseas. That's when she had girls to sleep over at her house, and I went to sleep over twice at her house. So she definitely was scared of him, I think, but I can't confirm that because I never asked. But I never spoke to her about that. That's just what I observed.
Because this could have gone the other way. He could have been another object of her bullying, but it sounds like she was the object of his bullying in their home.
And so, in some way, yes.
Talk to me about some of the things you've learned after the fact about female abusers and what's unique about them. Why is it so strange for people to believe?
So I think myself, I've had a mother who was very abusive. So that's one female abuse situation. And then Malka Leifer. And then I had even a female therapist who also was, got therapy trauma from her, not because she was sexually or physically, but emotionally she was just not equipped. And she did not do the right thing and was early on. So she did a lot of damage. So it's really disrupted my trust in females, but it's also made me aware that female abuse can go undetected, I think, a lot longer. But I also think a lot of abuses work that way, that the grooming and manipulation can be so normalized that you don't know is not normal. And for someone like myself, my sisters, and any other victims, Malka Leifer found the place that we were missing, which was the mothering, the nurturing, the care, and stepped in to kind of fill that hole as a woman. And I think in a way that's a lot harder to pick up. So for anyone that is thinking, well, how am I going to know if a female is being a perpetrator to my child or not? Just observe the level and closeness of the relationship. Observe there's most of us, like myself, I'm a very caring person. Of course, I'm going to, if I do rosters and pick up kids, I will offer them something to eat. If I have a snack, that's okay. But if anyone's worried about a female that's potentially too close to either their son or their daughter, just find out if that person is spending any one-on-one time with your child, whether son or daughter. Find out if your son or daughter is receiving any kind of gifts, any kind of too much emotional intimacy. I think that's what's very hard to understand, is that Malka Leifer's abuse was horrific. The sexual abuse was absolutely horrific. But I think the emotional damage and the absolute control that she had to know everywhere where I was all the time. She knew everything about me. She knew I was pregnant before I even told anyone. The knowledge and the power that she had through the knowledge she had of me and the control she had over me was, I wouldn't say equal, but I think that's what's really hard to understand about female perpetrators, because we're seen as nurturers and we're seen as mothers and we're seen as caring. But I recently did a post on TikTok about Malka Leifer, a mother and an abuser, because she was both. She had 8 children, 3 of them born in Australia, but she was also an abuser. So it's something that I feel like I've had a very eagle eye on, and thankfully I give my children the tools and whatnot, but I would really, that's just something that if there's a particular teacher or a coach or a singing teacher or anything that your child is involved with where a woman is just too, there's something that gives you that little niggly feeling that something's uncomfortably close, even if nothing has happened yet, listen to your gut, because you can see the difference. If someone had just said, why is Malka Leifer spending so much time alone with students? Or why is she always sitting next to someone? Or why is she having girls sleeping over at her house? There was enough red flags that anyone who would have thought about it would have seen and said, something doesn't feel right here. And if something doesn't feel right, do the next step and go question, or make sure your child is protected from that particular person. And just, it's a hard one.
Did people come to you after the fact, grown-ups in your life as you were an adolescent, saying, I saw red flags? Or everybody, it sounds like everyone just went about their day and their life like nothing ever happened? Was there an outcry or like, oh my gosh, we can't believe we missed this? And do you feel like you were abandoned and unheard by your community?
Very much so. Yeah. My own classmates, I'm still in touch with them, and I love them dearly, and I know that they believe me 100% because they grew up with me and they know who Malka Leifer's favourites were, and they can list all the other favourites in our class as well. So they would know other victims as well. And they could tell me, I had one of my classmates who doesn't live here, who messaged me and said, if I hadn't left, whether it was seminary or overseas, I'd rather not say which one, but she said, if I hadn't left, I would be where you are. Because Malka Leifer had started grooming and abusing her as well by her family, or she left to Sam, and it didn't continue because of that. So, but the community as a whole, I feel absolutely unsupported and abandoned, not because sometimes actions speak. Sometimes actions as in like sending a meal or food or sending one message is one thing, but the silence, particularly since my child finished last year, the silence has gotten to me really deeply, because there are so many people who saw Malka Leifer at healing groups, who would have seen me there as well, who were in the school around, who went to camps, who would have seen the level of involvement of Malka Leifer in my life, who would have known I was close to her, and definitely saw things that were not okay, and have never, ever said a word, not to the police, not to me, not to acknowledge, nothing. And the worst part is that, and this is something I've shared a couple of times now, that someone said to me 3 days before trial that they walked into Malka Leifer abusing me, a teacher at the school, someone I knew well, someone I taught some of her children, someone who taught me. She walked into Malka Leifer abusing me, and she did not go to the police and tell them that. And she only told me that 3 days before my trial began, which was too late by then. And she didn't want to go to the police even then. The silence, the fear of saying something, the fear of putting a religious woman in jail perhaps, the fear of unsettling. There's still a massive stigma around sexual abuse in the community, and myself as a religious person, that is something that I'm really setting out to break. People don't have to go public and have to share their story publicly, but I will do that for anyone who are in religious insular communities to help them realize they're not alone. And I had someone who messaged me privately and said, after hearing you speak, I finally felt like someone understood what I'm going through. And I don't even know her name. She's got a pseudonym, but she told me plenty about herself, but she still didn't even feel safe enough to tell me who she was or where she's from. I have no clue which country she's from. I just know that she's got 3 children in school, religious schools, and she finally felt someone could understand, and even her own family doesn't understand her. And that makes me so sad to hear, because people who have been abused deserve support, even if it's not in a public sense, but they should feel okay enough to say, I've been abused, I need support. But people are too scared to even say I've been abused, and they're too scared to support survivors. And rabbis are not doing their thing, shuls are not doing their thing, community are not doing their things. I said to the matchmaker, I know that sounds funny, but I'm close to the person who did match us, my husband and I speak to her once a week at least, and she's much more senior. But I said to her, if the rabbi of the shul, of that Dutch shul, had taken the opportunity when my sisters and I were going through trial to get up and talk about supporting survivors in the shul, connected to the parasha somehow, make it kid appropriate as well, Imagine how much that would have given to a community to start breaking that silence, to start taking away that stigma and being like, wow, this is happening. This happened in our community. It's currently happening now. The world knows about it, unfortunately, because of Malka Leifer and what she did. Everyone knows about it now. But what can we do that is different next time? It would have been such a teachable moment, but no rabbi did that. Why?
And even after she was convicted, still there was no talk about it in a communal setting?
Not in the religious communal setting. In events, definitely. My sister released a book. It should be coming out in September in the US. And there's been a lot of book events. No one that I've seen from the DAS community or ultra-Orthodox communities have been there. And it's a very important book. Talks a lot about it. And I know a lot of them have privately read it and some of them have given me feedback. But that's not enough. That's not enough to break the silence. There's got to be a communal feeling of support. And that's something that I intend to keep working through, both here and worldwide if I can.
It's just, that's more traumatic. And I'm not comparing, but I'm like, once it's out, once it's like so clear what happened, you're an adult. Now you have the sense of, now we can make this right. And you still can't make this right because everybody is just giving you this glass door that's like, we see you, we're keeping our mouth shut.
Yeah, and they're like, I'll give you a little example, which I did to test my own theory. Like people have WhatsApp status, right? So I put on WhatsApp status a year after the trial that on this day, Malka Leifer was found guilty. Didn't write anything about myself, my own feelings, my own pain, nothing. I just wrote on this day, not a single response. Not a single response. And my WhatsApp is full of my kids, parents, community, all the things that if I put a picture of a baby, let's say, or whatever, I would get loads of muzzle tovs and I would get responses. Now, I'm not taking that personally as in poor me, I didn't get a response. Not at all. From the 150 or 200 views I got on it, no one could say, wow, you did it or you got her in there because the silence is too deep. And that's what I took from that. I took from that this is a year post-trial, something massive happened. She's actually been convicted. She's guilty after so many years. And that date is very significant for me. Enough that I will, post it on my WhatsApp status. But the silence was so loud that day. It was unbelievable. And again, it wasn't because I needed the sympathy or the support. It was just indicative to me of where people are still holding around the topic of sexual abuse and sexual abuse survivors. And that's what's prompted me to talk up even more and be like, no, I'm going to break this.
Did the conviction relieve anything for you? Or did that just make things louder?
So because personally I received not guilty for my charges, that's a whole different topic. I have a different trajectory of healing to go through, which I'm working through. But yes, of course, her being guilty and in prison is absolutely the best thing that could have happened. She deserves to be there. She deserves, in my opinion, to be there for life. I have a very big fear that she will do it again when she comes out, and I'll do everything in my power to make awareness and raise awareness wherever she goes, that she does not be around vulnerable teenage females again.
It's not a place for jokes, but the name convicts get for being sentenced to life is a lifer.
I know. Yes, I've heard that a couple of times, that lifer should be a lifer.
I want to know a little bit more about the effects on your relationship with your husband. And has anything come up? Was there any breakthrough or that emotional support? From what you've been saying, when you went to police, they didn't really refer you to therapists. And wherever you went, there was just this, we're helping you with what you came to us for, but there's no that going extra mile. What did it look like when it was presented in your marriage?
I'll say probably a couple different stages. When I spoke to my husband and told him that Malka Leifer went overseas, it was like, oh, okay, she did something bad. But I played it down because I was still very newly married and didn't want to say really much and didn't know what to say even. When it came to the point of giving a police statement, it was like, oh, she did stuff enough that you need to give a police statement? Okay. But it was, again, I told you I was pregnant with my fourth child. I had 4 kids in 5 years. So I was very much in that, having a baby, breastfeeding, losing the weight, having a baby again, and also working full time. And like in between all that, it wasn't like I took off, weeks and weeks of maternity leave. I was back at work 5 weeks after I had my first 2. So it was all very distant from me. It was very disconnected from me. The story was disconnected from me. My own abuse was disconnected from me. So therefore it wasn't going to come into my marriage. Through the campaigning and stuff, I think I slowly opened up to my husband a little bit more and more and more. And of course, he was my biggest support because he was there while I was going overseas constantly to do. And who else? I wouldn't trust anyone else with my children besides him, of course. And he did that so well. I used to write a list of every little thing that needs to be done, lunchboxes, bath routines, bedtimes. Got to the point where I didn't have to do that anymore, which was great. The first time I went overseas, all my kids got chickenpox. Like, poor him. Literally the first time they all got chickenpox. But yeah, he became more and more supportive, and he's really good physically supporting. Like if I need to be away, and I went away during trial for 9 weeks, 7 weeks and was somewhere else or gone overseas multiple times, he's always there, steps up, and is really, really, really supportive and emotional. That's, growing. It's a big thing to be married to a survivor of abuse and to also be able to emotionally support at the same time. So that's, I'm a pretty strong person myself, and I'm very used to relying on myself to support myself as well. And then I did find my current therapist, who is, thankfully 3 years in, she's good. So that in itself has been a journey in regards to emotional support and finding the right people to help me through. But our marriage is definitely, we're almost 18 years married now, and we're definitely still growing. And there's been for sure challenging times because of all this. I will not say no, there hasn't been. Of course there has been. It can't not be. And Malka Leifer, because of what she did, she 100% impacted the beginning of my marriage in ways that I didn't really understand even last year when I went through the trial and really delved back into that world from my mature and worked on understanding of what happened. But that's something that I keep working on.
Random question. How did you find that first therapist? Who was it appropriate?
The male therapist?
Yeah.
Very first therapist that I saw, and he came to Australia to do some cyber conference and stuff like that. He somehow got to know my sister through someone else, and then I called him to ask him some advice on someone he saw in the community, a student I had an issue with that I knew he knew the family because there was some stuff going on in that family. And then he just said to me, if you ever need to talk, I'm here. And no one in my entire life had ever said that to me. And this was 2013, and I was very vulnerable at the time. My mother-in-law had fallen down the stairs and almost died, so we were dealing with that kind of stuff that was going on with my husband's family, and there was just so much going on, and my kids were very little, and he just hit me at a point where I was like, oh my, someone is actually willing to be there for me. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. I'm against therapy. I've never thought I'd ever go to therapy. This was my first experience at therapy. So he was in the US and we did Skype sessions. Happened to be 2014. I went 2013, December. I went overseas to my brother-in-law's wedding, which was in the same town that he lived in. So I did actually see him in person. And then post that, I decided I don't want to see him anymore. And that was the end of that. Yeah, so that wasn't very good. And then
and the female therapist, how did you find her?
The female therapist was a recommendation. Again, I swore off therapy after him, and I was like, I'm never trusting a human again. 2017, a friend suggested to me that I see someone that her daughter had seen and had disclosed abuse to. So she thinks maybe that will be a good fit. If this therapist could deal with it well, then potentially. And she was good, but she just was not emotionally equipped to deal with the level of complex trauma that I came to her with. And instead of referring me out, she just really put me down. And she really, really damaged me in ways that I really had to recover from to be able to trust again. And thankfully, I'm someone that keeps trying. So I do.
A PSA, finding recommendations from people like Shauna Aronson or other. I could have vouched for Shauna Aronson.
Oh, yeah, I love Shauna.
Yeah, trying to just get either survivors who've healed, who can recommend somebody from personal experience, or these resource centers, hoping you're not finding that one person who inserted themselves into a helping position to take advantage. Okay, you had this victim statement. There were many parts of it on Instagram.
Yes.
Could you talk to me about the significance of that? And what were you hoping to accomplish? And do you feel like you accomplished by doing it?
So I'm not sure. Yeah, people that don't go through the court process might not know this, but there's trial and then there's a plea hearing. And at the plea hearing, it is the one time that the victims can actually stand up in court and say to the judge the impact of the abuse on them. And sometimes family members can as well. Now, unfortunately, because I received not guilty, that was robbed from me. So as much as the verdict day was horrific, and that was the 3rd of April, the plea hearing day, I sat in court, and it was the most awful thing to feel so invalidated and have no voice, because I was not allowed to stand up there and tell the judge and the court, what Malka Leifer did to me on any level. It didn't matter. And I said with my therapist at the time, I said to her, I didn't get to give one in court, but we're still going to make one. I still need to make one because this is my way of owning what happened to me in a way that I never did before. And it was such a healing process to be able to write out that victim impact statement with her and put it aside and realize that I had every right to say it, just not legally. But then I was still so broken on the verdict that I couldn't look at it for months. But then the 3rd of April this year, I told my husband I need to go away and have a day or two to myself because it's very painful for me, but I'm going to achieve something. I'm going to take my victim impact statement out, what I worked on last year and I've been frozen and couldn't look at until now, and I'm going to own my story because I deserve to be able to say my victim impact statement that I was not allowed to say in court last year because a jury found the charges against me not beyond reasonable doubt. So I decided to break it up. It took me 2 hours to do it, but it's only 35 minutes. It's about 5 minutes or 4 minutes each one. I only filtered a little bit out that I decided I didn't want to share publicly, but I just thought that if this victim impact statement can help any survivor of abuse feel heard, understood, and validated, I have achieved something. And yes, I feel like I had a male survivor reach out to me and say that his wife watched all 7 parts of it and now understands him better. I have a family member whose husband was abused, and she's asked me to send her all 7 of them so she can watch them, so she can understand her husband better, even if it's not the exact same story, but just what abuse impacts can do. I had someone overseas say to me that if all religious people can see this, they would not use the language of, oh, why can't I get over it already, and what's wrong with them, and why did they decide to do this, and why they like this. Because she said to me, very rarely do people understand the impact of the abuse. You hear the gory details, you hear the graphic nature of it, sometimes in the news or in the papers. But how often do you really see the impact as it is? And she said it's unfortunate that a lot of people in her crowd don't have social media and don't have WhatsApp even, so that she can't pass it on to them. But she wishes they would watch it so they would actually understand. So I don't know how much of a fire she had, but even from those 3 examples alone, that's something.
I can't imagine what it's like to get a not guilty for the abuse that was done to you. Talk to me about that. Like, it's the ultimate disvalidation.
It really is. And everyone in my life has told me they believe me over and over. Anyone that cares enough to tell me. Or if I ask, let's say my therapist, do you believe me it happened? She'll say, without a doubt. She knows it's true. My siblings, the court, the prosecution team, everyone believes me. The way the court works is there were 90 charges against Malka Leifer. It went down to 27. The prosecution only gave me 5. They took the 4 most severe ones of rape and then 1 of indecent assault for a whole year wrapped up into 1 charge. It didn't give scope for anything else. Why they chose to do that, I don't know. It could be because of age, I'm not sure. Malka Leifer abused me for 6.5 years. My charges were 1.5 years of that abuse. When a jury get to hear that much of the story, when there is that much, they're basing it on the very little context they have. And juries in Australia are not allowed to talk to us or say anything to the media, unlike in America where they can. Here, there's nothing. So I will never know. Prosecution will never know. No one will ever know why they decided the way they did. But it did take them 9 days to deliberate. And that's a long time. It took them 9 days, and that was excruciating. And to hear not guilty from that was the worst possible thing. But the fact that she was guilty for 18 charges is incredible. And she deserves every single one of them. So, like I said in my victim impact statement, that I know she's guilty, not just guilty of 5, but guilty of absolutely hundreds more. Against me, myself in particular.
Talk to me about your relationship with your mother.
So my father died in 2019. I have no relationship with my mother since 2012.
Can you elaborate? You can say no.
No, my mother was extremely abusive, so it took me many years to have the strength to cut off from her. And that's something I've been speaking a little bit about on social media, on TikTok in particular, that people just don't talk enough about cutting off from toxic parents. And it took a humongous amount of strength to do so. And there's definitely still judgment within the community, but I don't really care about that because those people do not stand in my shoes and don't know what myself and my siblings have been through. So in 2012, just 3 days after my youngest was born, I decided to cut off from her and have not regretted. My life has been that much better after doing so.
The reason I ask is because sometimes in cases where there is abuse at home and then there is abuse outside of the home, all the energy to fight and expose goes to the person outside of the home, because it's so much more painful to accuse or to fight your own family member, parent, or grandparent. There've been every case under the sun. So do you feel like you had extra oomph to fight Malka because you felt like it's not something you can ever take against? It's not something you can ever go and get justice from your mother?
I don't see the two as related for me personally. People have asked us in the past few book launches I've been to with my sister after reading the book and seeing some of the abuse that we went through as a child, why we have not taken, or would we take our mother to court, make a statement to the police. My sisters and I have decided, not together, but I think myself personally, and I've discussed my answer with them and they agree, that we've done our own healing around our parents. Not healing fully. I don't think a person can ever be healed from an abusive childhood and upbringing. It's a constant work. But I don't have any need to take my mother to court. It's not going to give me anything. There's nothing there. Like, I don't have a desire to get justice for what she did. I know what she did. My sisters know what she did. We're all living proof together with each other about what she did to us and what childhood we had. So there's just never been a desire to take her to court for any reason. And I think the consequence of her actions is that she has 6 children living in Melbourne and grandchildren that she has nothing to do with. And that, I would think, would be pretty awful for an average person. But maybe it doesn't seem to bother her. I'm not entirely sure. But that is, I would think, to an average person, consequences enough. And I still, as a human, I still want to find out how she's doing. So I'll still ask people, 1 or 2 people that I trust, if they've heard from her or if she's okay. And if they tell me that she's being looked after by the community, receiving a phone call here or there, or sometimes people see her, then I'm like, good. As in, like, I don't want her not to be mistreated by anyone. I care. I still care, human to human, because I've got a lot of empathy. But other than that, no.
Is there anything else you wanted me to ask you or to share?
I think maybe just, I'm not sure what reach this will have and who will listen, but whoever does, I think I would say that just think about people in your life that are survivors, or people that you know that are survivors, whether it's in the community or your extended family, and just know that simple words carry so much weight, and supportive comments carry so much weight. And the more we as a community step up in our support and our validation of survivors, the more the stigma and the shame will decrease. And that just goes parallel to that. And we as a community have a responsibility to allow survivors to have their voice, to be heard, to be validated, and to be supported, so that abuse cannot continue to thrive. Because if people are supported and validated, and that message is clear in a community, then if something happens, someone can speak up and then potentially protect others. And that's something that I know needs to slowly change. I know big changes can happen overnight, but I just think that if everyone starts to really think internally about what they can do to create that change, it's how are you dealing with supporters, with supporting others or validating others who have been through abuse. And if you shift the way that you respond to that, then maybe other people will shift, and then slowly the shame can lessen, the stigma can lessen, and people can actually speak up without fear of that.
And I call anyone listening, and if you know of anyone who would want to share their story, even if the abuser can't be taken to court for any reason, your story is still there. And it's every story that's shared helps break that stigma, and it's important to speak up. Don't feel like there's no point. There's a point. And every story, there's momentum and there's compound impact that happens with each story.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Nicole. We'll link to your sister's book. Is there anything else you'd like to link?
My TikTok account, my Instagram account, and as always, happy to connect with survivors from anywhere in the world and support as well.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching until the end. This is the Franciska Show podcast. I am Franciska. This podcast is available on all your favorite podcast streaming apps. Please tell a friend, leave a comment here, make sure to subscribe to my channel. If you have any comments or feedback, please reach out. My information is in the show description of this video. Thank you for watching my YouTube channel. This is a Jewish Coffee House podcast. So check out the other podcasts on the network, including Orthodox Conundrum, Intimate Judaism, and Chokhmah Nashim. Thank you for watching and see you next time.